That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about MaXXXine, the 10th film directed by Ty West and the third in his thematic X series trilogy, which A24 is releasing July 5th, 2024.
What's your favorite Ty West film?
Probably The House of the Devil.
And I know we reviewed X and Pearl,
Mm-hmm.
which were the first two of the trilogy.
Yeah, and he's got a pretty good track record for B genre films, going back to his debut, The Roost. He did Cabin Fever 2. I like The Innkeepers. In a Valley of Violence has a really fun John Travolta performance. So, yeah.
What is MaXXXine about? In 1980s Hollywood, adult film star and aspiring actress Maxine Minx finally gets her big break. But as a mysterious killer stalks the starlets of Hollywood, a trail of blood threatens to reveal her sinister past. What's your pull quote?
Ultimately, Ty West doesn't quite earn a XXX badge with MaXXXine, presumably the culmination of his loose thematic trilogy dependent upon the presence of Mia Goth, navigating a world where the line between victim and perpetrator violently blurs.
Mine. MaXXXine is a bloated ending to a trilogy whose connective tissue feels very loose.
Well, first of all, Richard Ramirez was not stalking the starlets of Hollywood.
Well, okay, let's start with the trailer because Richard Ramirez is brought up, and several people who knew we saw the screening were asking me, like, what's the Night Stalker's relationship to the story? The answer is nothing. It's just in the background. It's happening in 1985. I was fully expecting MaXXXine to maybe, like, come toe-to-toe with Richard Ramirez, or maybe, like, mimic some of his killings.
Be some kind of influence.
Something.
It's just in the background, not unlike that movie The Wolf Hour with Naomi Watts, where she's locked in her sweltering New York apartment while David Berkowitz is killing people during the Summer of Sam.
Because MaXXXine doesn't really kill anyone except, well, she does kill some, like, side characters at the end, but the main person she kills is the person trying to kill her.
Yes.
Which is a big spoiler that we'll reveal in a second.
Ty West, again, I think that he's a fun, decent director whose works I look forward to. He kind of gets caught up in himself in a way that Tarantino does, because these three films, while I enjoyed X and Pearl, this one, this culmination feels like somewhat of a letdown, like he can't help himself.
I agree. It's my least favorite of the three.
And the takeaway I heard from other people that were at the premiere was how sleazy it is. If you think that MaXXXine is sleazy, I don't think you know what that means or have not seen sleaze.
I don't think they know what sleazy means.
Right.
But the story. So the trilogy started with X, which was set in the late 70s. A group of young people, including MaXXXine, played by Mia Goth, they go to like a Texas farmhouse to film a pornographic movie. Mm-hmm. And everyone except her is killed by the owners of the farm. So Pearl is about the owners of the farm, specifically Pearl, the old lady.
Also played by Mia Goth.
Who's played by Mia Goth, and how she became psychotic. So then X is in 1985, so several years since the massacre in X, MaXXXine has made her way to Hollywood. And she's become a popular porn star, but she's trying to break into like legitimate
straight films.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So she does get cast in a film called The Puritan 2, a horror film. And she understands this to be her big break. Her agent, who's my favorite part of the film, Giancarlo Esposito, he believes in her. So he's pushing her and she gets the role. But we see that someone is following her. Mm-hmm. And they've hired a private investigator to assist. And the private investigator is played by Kevin Bacon, who's my second favorite part of the film. And they very easily find MaXXXine, and they tell her, like, we know what you did back in Texas. They even show her, like, a newspaper clipping about, like, the Texas porn massacre.
And they send her a VHS tape of, like, outtakes from that.
It's like police evidence. Mm-hmm. So I was very confused by that, because it would seem like, did the police not sort of make a conclusion as to what happened during the film, like what happened during X, that film?
Yeah, she would have been exonerated, right?
Right. So not quite sure why someone thinks that they can blackmail her. But we see that this person who's trying to get MaXXXine, which again I don't understand because they know exactly where she is. They know where she works, where she lives, but they don't take her. And in the end, we kind of realize why. they are killing the people around her. So like her co-workers at the strip club, her best friend who's this gay guy who works at the video store underneath her apartment.
Leon, played by Moses Sumney, who is a musician that we saw in the series The Idol.
Oh, he was. We went to the premiere and the actors were there, and he was there, and I thought he looked so fabulous in his outfit. I hope I can find a picture. But and then like one of her coworkers, played by Halsey. So they're all getting knocked off, and the police detectives, Bobby Cannavale and
Michelle Monaghan, homicide. Yeah.
homicide, they're begging her like, girl, everyone, like all these people are victims. All the victims are people you know. Surely you have some information for us. But she refuses. However, it's affecting her work because she's been cast in this movie, and the director, played by
Elizabeth Debicki.
She is real tough, and she's like, I can tell something's going on in your personal life. You better get your shit together. So take the weekend, blow off some steam, get your affairs in order, because when you come back on Monday, you better have your head in the game.
And,
So
well, Kevin Bacon keeps sneaking on set.
we need to talk
somehow
about
as well.
that scene where he chases her, but she, with the help of her agent, killed Kevin Bacon in a pretty fun scene.
That's might be my favorite scene of the film.
And she goes back to work, except that in the end, between Monday and her killing Kevin Bacon, earlier on, Kevin Bacon gives her an address, this mansion in the hills underneath the Hollywood sign. So she finally decides to go to see if she can put an end to all this. So she just strolls up to this mansion, and that's where we discover who the killer is, the person trying to get a hold of her. And guess who it is? Her damn daddy, who we're kind of introduced to in X, because we see when these young people are traveling, I believe they go into like a convenience store and they hear some preacher preaching. And if I recall, I remember thinking that in X we know that her father is like a preacher man. Mm-hmm. So it turns out that her dad is making like a religious snuff film. So he was taking the people around her and killing them and recording it. Mm-hmm. And the climax of the film is going to be him basically killing his daughter.
And giving her what she wanted to be famous. Because the film opens with footage of her as a child in 1959 with his voice in the mantra that they shared together. So that's why it was not surprising to me at all.
But of course the police show up, stop it to a degree. The two detectives end up getting killed. So the final standoff is between Maxine and her dad, and she kills her dad. And you'd think that'd be the end of the film, but oh no. Because there's more.
Go ahead.
Well, we see that her movie's been released and it's a hit. She's also become famous because she is responsible for capturing another serial killer, her dad. So we also see Richard Ramirez has been caught. And then we see her on set with filming another film. I was very confused by the end, because then we're told 1 month later.
Yes.
So I can't decide if I think they filmed and released this film in a month, or I don't know.
I think the ending is kind of terrible. It's like Ty West couldn't help himself. And I think I can figure out why from the final scene, but she shoots her dad point blank in the head and his head explodes. So there's that gory scene. Then there's the premiere at the Chinese, which is very tongue-in-cheek because that's where the premiere of this film was, to the Puritan 2. And then we go back to set, we're told a month later, and it's very unclear if this is the next film that Elizabeth Debicki is directing with her, because they have a moment of silence for the Lily Collins character, a cast member of Puritan 2, who was murdered by her dad. And then the final shot is of the decapitated bust of Maxine while Kim Carnes' Betty Davis Eyes plays over it, because the film opens with a quote from Betty Davis that I also think doesn't quite fit the theme of Maxine.
Because the quote is something about,
in this business, until you're known as a monster, you're not a star. But Maxine's not a monster, and I don't think that the press is interpreting her as one either.
well, there's another quote about her being like a killer.
Well, Debicki is telling her about the character Maxine is playing in the film, and she says, your character's a killer but not a villain.
But yeah, I don't think Maxine's a killer. She was defending herself. And then in this film, again, she's trying to stop this person who's trying to kill her. Anyway, I'm just going to start going through my notes. The film opens in 1959. We see a video of little Maxine being recorded by her dad, and clearly her dad wanted her to be a religious, like evangelist, like him, but like a star.
He was trying to make Amy Semple McPherson. That's what he was trying to do.
But of course, she strayed away. So in 1985, which is where when this movie's set, we're told that Maxine says, "I'm 33 years old, so the shelf life for porn stars, like I'm done. So I have no choice but to transition into Hollywood." I know who Theda Bara is, but remind me.
I made you watch her in A Fool There Was.
Because there's a moment when Maxine is standing over Theda Bara's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. What do you think that meant?
Well, Theda Bara was part of the coterie of silent film stars where people were confused about what actors that they were separate from the personas that they were playing, and Theda Bara was one of the original vamps. So her name was apparently an anagram for Arab death.
Yes, that's right.
But yeah, and we get a Buster Keaton reference in there too.
Well, that's my next note. I would say the most shocking scene is Maxine is walking home, and it appears she lives maybe like in downtown LA in the 80s, which is kind of sketchy. It's either downtown or Hollywood, but it's kind of sketchy, or it is very sketchy. And she's walking through an alley, and some person looks like they're going to assault her. And they kind of like, she's like at a dead end, and they have a knife, and they're telling her they're going to assault her. But Maxine's not afraid, and she pulls a gun on him, tells him to get naked, lay down on his belly, and then we see her stomp his scrotum, and it explodes. That was pretty shocking.
Yes. But in a good way. It made me think like this is going to be like Tracy Lords in a Death Wish film.
Yes, I thought this was going to be a smart slasher. But then it kind of, in the first hour, I was with it. But this final act, which we'll get to, really threw me off.
It certainly has points to be made because we're in the home video era. That in the UK across the pond we have the video nasty list and all these protesters about the content their children are watching. So that is all also in the background, and I think more prominent than The Night Stalker.
The protesters, they are quite prominent, and I don't know that I felt like the point was. It feels very tangential to what's happening in the film. Because we're really not privy to the film The Puritan 2. We're just told that it is a horror film, and that the first film made a scream queen out of that star. So Maxine's hoping that will happen to her. So I felt like all these people protesting just kind of felt like, okay.
Well, there's also the character Leon, who works in a video store, her buddy. When she tells him that she's landed the role in The Puritan 2, she's like, "Oh, you're going to be just like Marilyn Chambers," who, of course, was an adult film star who transitioned kind of. She was in Cronenberg's Rabid, and she's like, "No, not Marilyn Chambers. I'm going to be Brooke Shields."
She's a real star.
She's a real, but Brooke.
Because she's in a Muppet movie.
But Brooke Shields never did porn. Technically, she showed her breasts, but
True.
But there's a difference there about who could really make that kind of transition and how limited they are.
I thought a good scene was Maxine has to get her face molded. So she goes to the set or wherever to get the molding done. And of course it's a claustrophobic situation because she has to stay covered with this clay for 10 minutes. And that's when Maxine has a panic attack thinking about the old woman she killed. And I thought that was effective.
Yeah, that's effective. Sophie Thatcher from Yellow Jackets is in that scene. I don't understand why she's like, "I'm going to leave you for 10 minutes. Like, maybe you should stick around."
Yeah. I did like that scene though. And then speaking of, so then she meets the director to talk through the film, and they go on a tour through like Universal Studios basically. And they go to the Bates Motel, like that scene, and then the Psycho House. But related to the Psycho House, Kevin Bacon gets on set, and there's a really awkward chase scene where they're running through like many sets and there's no one there.
It's a ghost town.
It's like a ghost town on this set where just a minute ago we saw a bunch of people shooting, and then we do see one security guard,
Larry Fessenden.
But I just thought that was so silly.
But that's very much like an homage to these kind of films in the 80s, because Halloween 2, they're in a hospital and Michael Myers is killing all these people.
Sure. Again, I think, Mia Goth, I really like her on screen.
Same.
And Kevin Bacon is doing this like Louisiana crawdad accent that I really thought was fun. There's another scene where she's driving around in this really nice Mercedes SL convertible, but then she lives in a shitty apartment. But I guess that's very LA.
It's an okay apartment. I've seen a lot worse.
But there's a scene where, because Kevin Bacon's following her around, and we see that he's tailing her with like a VHS camcorder, and this lady gets out of the car, takes keys, people put keys through their fingers, and basically like stabs him in the face and tells him leave her alone. That was a pretty shocking scene.
It is, and there was no recourse for that. I mean, Beatrice Dahl just slapped a meter maid, and she couldn't come back to the U.S. So.
Then she runs to her agent, and she's like, "Hey, Giancarlo Esposito," and she says, "You're my attorney, right?" He's like, "Well, I am an entertainment attorney, but technically I'm your agent." "Well, don't we have confidentiality?" He says, "Well, sure. What's going on?" And that's when she explains to him, "We assume everything. We don't hear her tell him anything. We just hear the aftermath, which is him saying, 'I got you. I'll take care of it.'" And I thought his character was so good because initially I'm like, is he genuine? But he is. He's really down for her. The part that's missing for me is I don't understand. I wish that Maxine would have been like a sure thing. Like her star is definitely on the rise. So this agent is like really invested in making sure that she makes it. Because she's in like the Puritan too, and we even hear the director say that this is an opportunity for her to show that she could do something. So this movie is not a guaranteed hit. So the fact that Giancarlo would kill someone for her feels real crazy. But the scene that I think we both think is pretty damn good is they kill Kevin Bacon by handcuffing him to the steering wheel of his car, and they put his car in one of those junkyard crushers and smash him. And then some Doberman pinchers come and eat the flesh that's
remains
leaking from the car.
And then Esposito has some line like, "That's what agents are for." Tim Robbins needed a friend in the industry like that in The Player.
But even before that crushing scene, Kevin Bacon finds Maxine dancing in a club. I like the cinematography, and I think the set design, production design, they did a really good job of making it feel like the 80s, along with the soundtrack.
The soundtrack goes a long way, but Elliot Rocket was a cinematographer who's worked with him a lot. And then Tyler Bates, the composer, who scored all three.
But the point that the film lost me is when she decides, after her director says, "You have the weekend to get your shit together," she decides to go to the Starlight Drive address, that mansion below the Hollywood Hills. And she pulls up, the detectives are following her, so they know that she's there. The house is so high up in the hills that it requires a gondola ride to get up there. And when she gets up there and we see that it's her dad, he explains to her that he's basically making a religious snuff film. And then they have a full set, like in this mansion, and they tie her up, and the dad looks crazy because he's wearing like stage makeup. And he's crazy and fun, but I think this is when I just felt like, okay, this is wild in a way that I found.
Well, yeah, and there's all these acolytes there, like they were just ready for her to show up. And also,
they all have guns. And
did he rent this house in the hills?
And how does he afford this mansion in the hills?
What does he do? Yeah, it made me have a lot of questions.
And then, of course, we know the detectives are going to show up at a point because we saw them following her. And then there's a big shootout, which was kind of fun. But yeah, I just think that it just felt so ridiculous. Also, Bobby Cannavale's character's was an aspiring actor. So all of his lines he's reciting as if he's acting.
Yes, like he's doing a bit.
And I didn't think it worked entirely.
I don't think so. I agree with you, Esposito, but besides Goth and Bacon is the best part. Although that wig, I mean, he looks like Tracy Ellis Ross's auntie. This is a terrible wig.
Well, it's very 80s to me.
Sure.
But yeah, I really enjoyed him. A fun thing was that, because Ty West spoke before the film, and he talked about how it's always been his dream to have a premiere. So he had a big premiere at the Man's Chinese Theater. And within the film, we see that Maxine's film is being premiered at the Chinese. So that felt cool.
Yeah, the level
to be sitting in that theater watching this film premiere at the theater.
The level of detail showing Hollywood Boulevard and all the film titles on the marquees, like Hail Mary for, I think it says For One Night Only, the Godard film, and St. Elmo's Fire, and Police Academy 2, I think. To me, it's fun. It's clear that he has kind of a reverence for this era and the methods of filmmaking then.
I know that there's an extra named James Hunter who accused, or I think is suing Mia Goth for assaulting him. And I looked him up to see what he looks like. He plays a corpse in the film. I wonder if they cut him.
I think they did.
Or was he one of... Because I don't recall any male corpses. Because the people they find at like what looks like MacArthur Park, those are women, right?
Mm-hmm. They're Halsey and the other friend.
Yeah, so maybe they cut him out of the film, or maybe he stopped filming after she kicked his ass. But anyway, yeah, of the three, Maxine is my least favorite. That being said, I think Ty West is a cool filmmaker.
Sure, yeah,
with fun ideas, and I also read that based on the success of this film, he has an idea for a fourth installation, so this could be a quadrilogy.
I hope he takes a little more time. I think this just felt rushed, like there was the opportunity to do it with A24, and they did.
Well, A24 exec spoke before the screening and said, like, it's unheard of that someone, 5 years almost to the day, they were given the script for X, and now they're premiering the third film. So it does feel kind of rushed. Even Ty West said he wrote the first script on a whim, which was kind of disappointing to hear. Like, oh, so this was not like a well thought out universe. But
the Debicki character is interesting because I think she's a reference to a lot of women working in Hollywood in the 80s. Coolidge, Susan Seidelman, Mary Harron even, but I kept thinking Stephanie Rothman, who was one of the few genre female filmmakers from the 70s. But she has a line where she's talking to Mia Goth about the script, and she's like, this is a B movie with A ideas, and this film feels like a B movie with B ideas.
Ironically,
it drops all of these, really compelling elements of the period and the time and the culture, and then doesn't really tie them all together cohesively.
What would you give Maxine?
It made me want to watch something actually sleazy. I put on Mascara last night with Charlotte Rampling and Michael Sarrazin about a man killing trans women. That is a terrible film. I would give it 3 stars. If 2.75 was possible, I would, but a reluctant 3.
I think it's okay. I would give it 2.5 out of 5. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.